Yes, we are now, of course. Call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Ms. Lynn? Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Here.
Mr. Bean?
Present.
Mr. Coffey?
Here.
Mrs. Stiff?
Present.
Mr. Kennedy? Mr. Edmond?
Here. We stand for the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'd like to welcome all our visitors today. So we're going to move down, since we don't have any comments on our agenda items. I'd like to have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
We do have the public hearings.
Oh, you got the public, oh, that's right, sorry. We got the public hearings, excuse me. Can I have a motion to open the public hearing for the application or waiver of school mandate physical education?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
roll call,
Mr. Edmond?
yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Is there any public comments? If not, can I have a motion to close public hearing for application of waiver of the school mandate for physical education?
So moved. Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes. Can I have a motion to open the public hearing for application of waiver of the school mandate for driver's education fee?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Is there any public comments? If not, can I have a motion to close the public hearing for application of waiver of the school mandate for the driver's education fees?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero Numer?
Yes.
Now we move to recognition and awards. So we'll turn it over to the fine building principals at this time.
Good evening. We ask that all students who are receiving board recognition tonight stay until all of the recognitions are finished. At that time, the board will take a short recess so the members of the school board, the superintendent, and assistant superintendents can meet and congratulate each of the award winners and their families. Tonight, Ms. Parker and I are proud to recognize students from the class of 2023 who have been named Illinois State Scholars. The Illinois Student Assistance Commission gives state scholar designation annually to senior students who are in the top half of their graduating class and scored at or above the 95th percentile nationally on the ACT or SAT. So it's quite an accomplishment. Students, when I call your name, please come forward. Once everyone is called, we will take a picture, and parents are welcome to come up and take pictures too. So the class of 2023 Illinois State Scholars from the Central Campus are Lorena Aguado, Andrea Alvarez, Milagros Arriaga, Rosemary Arroyo, Teddy Balcazar, Kylene Crystal Bond, Leslie Catalan, Michael Del Rio, Ana Franco, Rafael Gutierrez, Diana Hernandez, Eric Hernandez, Jimena Ledesma, Giovanni Ortiz, Maria Placencia Almanza, Zachary Riley, Samantha Rudiger, Krista Sierra, Samantha Senzio, Carla Vega, and Alexandra Widlack. I promise we invited them. Thank you. Oh, okay, come on up. Yeah. Thank you. Just come up here. Thank you.
It's not normally my job, so scooch over to go a little bit, please. This is going on the website. I know. It's stressful. Ready? 1, 2, 3. A couple more. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm here to recognize the Illinois State Scholars from Joliet West. Please come forward when you hear your name read. Autumn Allen, McKenna Anderson, Jasmine Angelou, Regis Apia, Ryan Bates, Tanner Brooks, Austin Brown, Angela Conde, Delilah Cortez, Jamie Daniels, Patrick Dalling, Boris Yedevikov, Elizabeth Ferrick, Diego Fernandez, Jaden Megan Gilberto, Lisa Hartney, Samantha Hubert Flores, Leslie Hernandez, Marie Hazel, Grace Holmgren, Fahid Ibrahim, Emma Jolly, Janaea Jordan, Lydia Kozel, Holly Law, Jack Fair, Matthew Mahachek, Eleanor Maston, Abigail McCoon, Destiny McNair, Natalie Morales, Alejandro Montez, Cheyenne Moser, Caitlin Murdoch-Shea, Derek Neal, Mary Papendria, Abby Price, Daniel Prost, Ryan Rivera, Owen Salerno, Gianna Sartori, Isabella Simoncelli, Angie Smith, Sayani Uloa, Elizabeth Wellman, Emmanuel Zamores, and Kevin Zamudio. Anyone else? All right.
All right, ready? 1, 2, 3, again. One more. Okay, Karen? How do you do? Take us a short break.
So, do the McNears live here? Do the McNears live here?
They live in the building.
I think so, and at West.
At this time, we're going to take a brief break so that we can shake hands with the recipients, okay?
They don't get to go home. do
No, they
went
don't
to
get to
sleep.
go. They sleep here with the evidence.
I don't think
Okay, I guess we're gonna go back to normal, huh? With the room being as crowded as it normally is, right? But we're so glad to, it's always a great deal recognizing and celebrating our students. So I really appreciate that. And celebrating the parents and all their hard work as well. We're not gonna forget the teachers and everyone else in the administration. So we're gonna move to our superintendent report?
Sure, thank you. No correspondence or legislative report. Obviously, we're doing second read on the policies, so those would be your legislative updates with our mandates that we need to put in place. And so we will begin with our 5-year financial presentation, and we have Dr. Hampton presenting for us tonight.
Good evening to everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Each year, I present to the Board of Education a 5-year projection. And I know that some of this information the board actually heard a couple of weeks ago at the State of the District. But essentially, there are different parameters in relation to how we build out the projection. So as you can see in this slide here, it's actually a pie chart showing where we actually receive our revenue, with 57% coming from property taxes. The next highest would be from the state, and we have what we consider evidence-based funding, and then, of course, with the federal revenue. So that's mostly our title and idea grants from the federal government. Another key assumption when we start to talk about revenues is equalized assessed value, which is essentially the totality of all of our properties within our districts. And what we have in the projection essentially is the percentage increase from year to year, all the way through year 2026. So in 2021, 5%, we kept the other years flat in regards to that increase of EAV change. The second revenue assumption is new growth in terms of equalized assessed value. We're unique in our district, in our area, in terms of actually seeing growth, new growth each year. And that's attributed to just a lot of the industry that's occurring in our area, which is a great thing, right? So this corresponds a lot of times when I'm having conversations with the board about tax levies and budgets, when we start to talk about EAV and new growth. We know that when I presented for the levy, we had to levy a little bit more so that we can capture all of these funds. So all of these assumptions are in this projection, and we're keeping it flat at 45, but in some years we've been more than 45 million in terms of new growth, but we just stay conservative when we start to talk about things because it is an unknown, but we have seen an increase each year in terms of some type of new growth. The third part of this is our consumer price index, or what we call CPI. And in a nutshell, it's essentially the cost of goods and services from one year to the next, right? And so with that, the actual CPI for this past year was 7.1%, but because we are what we consider tax capped, we only can capture 5%. So again, when we presented the levy back in November, December, we levied the 5%, but we had to levy a little higher in order to capture the new property, right? So right now, things are trending lower in terms of pricing. However, in our assumption, we're gonna be closer to that 4 to 5%, but then it's projected that it's gonna drop back down in terms of CPI in future years, somewhere between what normally is the average of about 1.5 to 1.7%. But in my assumptions, it's 2%. As we receive actual numbers, I could input this into the projection, and then I can update that information at any given time. Some other key revenue assumptions, evidence-based funding. This is the way we are funded from the state. flat for all years. However, the General Assembly has allocated the $350 million for evidence-based funding, and we're considered Tier 1, which is the highest need district, so we will receive full allocation. Transportation reimbursements are flat for all years. All other state and federal funding are flat in terms of the projections. Again, we try to be as conservative as possible because sometimes it's just unknowns, right? And then I also put in here the two grants that's remaining, which is the ESSER 2 and the American Rescue Plan grant, because it goes through 2024. So that's why that's in here. It falls off, but it continues through 2024. And there's components of each of the grants that we will maintain once those grants fall off, and that's in the projection. So we have some staffing. For the most part, that's the highest percentage of costs are the staffing that we added, but there may be some other programs or initiatives that will remain. But staffing is the largest. Budgeted for expenditures, like with all school districts, salaries and benefits is the highest. Combined for us is 65%. Normally you will see that somewhere between 62 to 70%, depending on the size of the district, the size of the budget, number of staff, those types of things. And then, of course, after that is purchase services as the next highest, but it really, and benefits, salaries and benefits are the key to all expenditures when we start to talk about our budgets. And the key assumptions are related to expenditures. Salaries in this projection are subject to negotiation, so I'll pull out information in terms of increases. Increased FTE, we have 8 in for next school year. And then there is, in the projection, a modest increase to FTE over the next 5 years. So there is some type of increase, not as significant as 8, but there is some type of increase over the next 5 years in terms of FTE. Retirement savings are included in here. Health insurance increase by 6% for future years, and it's lower. The trend is really somewhere between 10 to 12. Historically, because we have an insurance committee, we've done a great job of maintaining our costs and keeping it low, to the point where for the past 4 years, our staff has not seen an increase in insurance costs, which is great. Dental insurance increased by 3%, and then all other expenses are increased by 5%. So we know, cost of materials and supplies and those types of things. So it's at 5% in terms of those projections. Here, I know you can't see it here, but essentially, and there'll be a graph, but this page here, and you can blow it up on your screen, it just shows our aggregate revenues, and it's showing that it's actually increasing, and our aggregate expenses are increasing in terms of those things. But what you will see in this slide here, because this is the slide in terms of the graph that really speaks to all of those numbers, and we see an upward trend, and that's really what you want to see in terms of this projection. You don't want to see that line going down, right? So we're seeing that trend going up. We're unique in our district that we receive, in terms of our property tax base, is high. So we receive quite a few taxes in relation to local. By us being Tier 1 with evidence-based funding, we receive the highest amount given to school districts in regards to that. So that's unique just in itself. In terms of just revenue streams and revenue sources. And then, of course, even through title, based on your free and reduced numbers, you get allocations in terms of title and things like that. So we do receive different pots of money in terms of revenues that some districts don't receive these types of dollars because, local property taxes may be down, so the state has to try to compensate for those things. Or sometimes local property tax is higher and then you get less from state funding, right? So, but with us, because of our demographics, we actually have an opportunity to capture quite a few revenue dollars from the state and federal government, in addition to our large tax base. And one thing that we are seeing in terms of the new property, the majority of the new property are coming from businesses, which is good for the district, versus housing, right? So you have housing, yeah, you get that value, but then you have the cost of educating students. If you have just businesses, then you have the opportunity just to capture revenue streams, right? So, and then there are other businesses that's out there that will be a significant gain for the school district as they start to build out some of these other corporations and businesses within our area. And then, of course, we always just have to, talk about observations as we move forward. The three things that we always talk about, and probably have talked about for the 10 years I've been here: property tax freeze, reimbursements. There are always legislations and bills and proposals to do some things with property taxes. Additional EBF funding, will it stay flat? Will it increase? Will it decrease? And then, of course, pension cost shifts, because there's always conversations around pension costs and the liabilities associated with pension costs, and actually districts taking up to 10% of the cost. So these are always out there, and so we're always on the lookout in terms of what's being proposed. Is it going to come to fruition? Do we need to contact our legislators about legislation that may be proposed? So we're always talking to our legislators and constituents in Springfield around these bills that's out there. I know we just were talking about the one relating to, foreign language and the cost that's associated with that, and potentially having to add staff, and how does that work in the entire scheme of where we are financially. Can we house them in our schools? Do we have the capacity in our buildings? It's all of those conversations as we move forward and as we plan. What you don't see in here are construction projects, because that's funded separately through our bonds. So like the master facilities plan and some of those things like that. And we have a different schedule in relation to when we can sell bonds and when we can do these projects. And so those presentations are normally separate. I will say, going forward, what I've done for some of our projects is to start to allocate dollars into our construction fund for future projects that may not be part of they'll be a part of the master facilities plan, but possibly on an off year where we can't sell bonds. So then that way we can continue to do upgrades and renovations as we move forward. Any questions? Okay.
Thank you. Our next presentation is our annual Human Resources Hiring Update. So our HR Director, Amanda Herrera Ford, will take us through the presentation. And just as a reminder, this was associated with Strategy 6 in the previous strategic plan, and now it's associated with Strategy 1.
All right, good evening. So as Dr. Guzman mentioned, this is the annual hiring update that we do for the board every February. And as she stated too, this is now aligned with Strategy 1, Action Plan 1 through 3. So some of the hiring practices that we have in place for our administrative team and for all of our hiring teams is that any member of a hiring team or an administrator who is going to be a team leader goes through the same hiring training so that everyone is on the same page, everyone receives the same information. Let's see. In this school year, 22-23, we hired approximately 80 staff members, 43 certified and 37 classified staff. January 31st of this year, we had a district leadership team meeting reviewing our annual hiring practices and procedures. And after staffing is done, we will meet again in March to discuss our team leaders that are going to be moving forward for our positions that are open for next school year. We do have a current hiring team for mathematics, as this is an area of difficulty in hiring across the state, and we are definitely seeing that in our district as well. So now we have some data that we can share. This data is pulled from the Illinois report card. Just shows you, comparisons between our district and the state of Illinois, and as you can see, we are pretty comparable. This is teacher demographics statewide. And then we look at more data here, again, from the Illinois report card, racial and ethnic makeup of public school teachers and students. So this is just some nice information to share from the state. Here we're going to go through a few slides just so you can kind of see where we've been and where we are now with our recruiting and hiring. We're going back all the way here to 2020. Obviously, we had COVID in there, so that has affected things a little bit. Back in 2021, we had 397 applicants for teaching positions, and you'll see that drastically change as we move to the next slides here. So this is 21-22. We're now at 837 applicants for teaching positions. And you can see all the career fairs that were attended back in 2021. And then 22-23, again, we're seeing a large increase in the number of applicants that we've had. All the career fairs here listed were attended in the spring of 22. And then I'll have a future slide to show upcoming career fairs and career fairs that are ongoing right now. This is some nice data going back to 17-18, again, just to show you where we've been and where we are now. And you can see that our hiring demographics have really changed over the years. And I do believe that is to the hiring process that we do currently have in place. Again, just some more data. Looking at teacher candidates specifically, you can see a demographic breakdown of applicants of color over the last 3 years. You can see some of the numbers changing. Back in 2021, we were at about 25%, and as of this year, we're at about 30%. So we are trending in the right direction. Here we're looking at data that's promotions, so internal promotions, teachers moving into positions of dean, counselor, social workers, IEP managers, psychologists, instructional coaches. You can just see the data. We don't typically have too many promotions each year, just a few, but we do have some nice numbers across the board there. Here we're looking at data from the Illinois State Board of Education website. So this is unfilled teaching vacancies across the state by year. Again, you can see that there's been a drastic increase. Back in 2018, we were at about 1,400, and now we're at about 2,100. So issues that we're seeing in our district, we're seeing statewide too. And then here we're looking at positions that we've been unable to fill for this school year. 6 teaching positions in total, again, math, bilingual, English, and then a special ed teaching position. Thankfully, we've been able to cover these through overloads and things like that with our staff that we do have. Next, we look at teacher recruitment. So we have a lot of different avenues to hire and to promote our open positions. After staffing is over, I will be posting our open positions on different websites like HBCU. They have an online platform that I'm all set up with. Handshake is a really great one because it's free to post jobs, and it goes to almost all colleges across the nation if you select that option. So really a lot of exposure there. So I think that's a really great tool that we can use. We do use Indeed because a lot of people who are looking for work use Indeed. So it's a great way to just reach out to candidates that might not necessarily think, hey, I should see if this school district is hiring. IESA Job Bank, JobSpot, K-12 JobSpot, We do have a posting in the National Minority Update as well. We have social media, so there's really a lot of tools that we can use to promote all of our open positions that we're going to have for next year. I know in the past, there's been a desire to reach out to Governor State University, so I will be attending a career fair there. I have reached out to Chicago State University and haven't had much luck, so I will continue to work on that. This slide, we're looking at just ways that we are building and promoting our teaching positions. We have we have programs in place where we can let our students explore the teaching profession. Specifically, we have a program for dual credit with St. Francis. We have a student-teacher model in place, which is the St. Cloud co-teaching style, and we also have a really wonderful partnership with ISU for our student-teacher placement. Here we're just looking at some information on teacher and administrator retention rates. And then we move to, again, retention rates by race, a 4-year trend. Just see some of the data here. I do want to include information about classified staff as well. I think we talk a lot about teaching staff, but I think it's important to recognize our classified staff as well, because we have 414 classified staff members that make up transportation, cafeteria, security, paraprofessionals, buildings and grounds, and office staff. So this is just some nice information about the demographics of that group, and I think we are very strong in our cultural diversity in this group. And you can see from the pie chart there. And then we'll end with this nice quote as to why a diverse teaching staff is so important. We want to make sure that we're providing our students with a quality education with teachers and staff members that they can relate to. Any questions? No? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. All right, our next presentation is from our Parent Teacher Advisory Committee, and we have Mr. Brett Markham, Mr. J.R. Randich, and Mrs. Julie Edelman. And just as a reminder, this is a board-directed committee that meets annually. There's no action tonight. This is just a presentation of the overview of recommendations from the committee, and the policy recommendations are for first read under new business. And we did have the district attorney look at the recommendations as well, and those are included in those policies.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
We'll be quick tonight. So our timeline was condensed this year for our Parent-Teacher Advisory Committee because of strategic planning. So we had 3 meetings. You can see how our team was made up. We'd always love to see more people participate in this group. So hopefully next year when we have more time and we're not coming off of strategic planning, we have more engagement with the group. So just getting right into some of what the recommendations are. There's 3 policy recommendations that you have for first read tonight. So just to give you a quick overview of each of those. 7190E is our discipline exhibit. This is just outlines definition of the policy and then what are the potential consequences that could happen if a student violates the policy. So we just cleaned that up a little bit. Also added some language clarifying, making sure that we're reflecting in the policy what our practice is, and minor clarifications throughout. Policy 7200 is our suspension policy. So we added language about notifying parents when a student's assigned to in-school suspension or intensive student supports room. Again, we already do that, but we just wanted to reflect in the policy that what our practice is. And then 7210 is the expulsion policy. The recommendation there is just to reflect that our Board of Education uses a hearing officer to conduct hearings on behalf of the board. So those are pretty quick and simple recommendations in terms of policy.
Good evening, everybody. So this next slide you will see is a committee discussion that proposes a change to our dress code and our attire. Although this is not a new discussion, this was something that was in great length discussed with the board last year, but the committee has asked for it to come back to the board to be reviewed. With the less use of masks and the ability to be able to see faces, that was a big, I think, concern last year. If we have a hood or a hat and masks on, would we be able to identify, and a concern of safety? So with the less use of masks and be able to identify, you will see that in the proposed change, that we would absolutely need to be able to recognize the face of the student if the hood or hat or any headwear is being utilized. My guess is there probably is going to be some questions regarding this.
Does the board have any questions regarding that one?
Yes. So I see hats and headwear. What does that include?
So I think it could be up for interpretation, and we could be more detailed on that. Like we said, this is a first read. We would want to make sure that there isn't any kind of old beliefs of any gang identifiers or things that could be misconstrued in any other way.
So my next question is, because at the beginning of the school year, I think we agreed that we would not allow students to wear any headgear. So can you just explain the justification for bringing
Sure.
it back?
So I think our staff are in a daily, even hourly time frame of trying to enforce this rule. This is something that does include all of us, deans, security, the classroom teachers are requiring hats and hoods to be taken off on a regular basis. It is becoming, and has been, a power struggle. It's something that teachers, and as a committee, became a discussion of, although we had only a small amount on our committee, they were the voice of what they were seeing in the classroom and the discussions bringing to the committee. And we have discovered, through a lot of these discussions and these power struggles, there's different cultural expectations that were brought out in some of those discussions. Other things that were brought up, upkeep of hair. A student comes into the school and has a hood on or hat on, and through that power struggle, sometimes behaviors are escalating, and eventually we get down to the root cause, which was hair upkeep. If that's braids being outgrown or cleanliness of hair that day. So we would try to then meet that need in whatever way, sometimes being a beautician in a dean's office or a counselor's office or even the principal's office at times, to then try to get the headgear off. But that was an extensive amount of time out of the classroom setting. There's been emotional responses to this that have then escalated to a behavior. And sometimes the hat goes on because they're having a bad day, or the hood's up, because they're just trying to get through the day. We see as they're entering the building, after they've walked a mile to school, it's cold out and a hood's up, and they're being greeted with hoods down, IDs on, hoods down, IDs on. So that's been kind of the discussion that was made with the committee, and been an ongoing discussion throughout the school year, as much as we're trying to enforce this rule, and our teachers are doing a nice job with it. It is the reason why we're bringing it back to the board.
So does headwear include do-rags and bonnets?
I think that would be something we would need to discuss.
It's not a secret that I supported it the last time, but my concern is on this one, have the deans been consulted regarding the enforceability of this with vague language of visible to school staff? Because the last thing I'd want is students being targeted, and there be a disparity in the way that it's being enforced.
So we're enforcing it throughout all students, throughout our buildings at this point, and how it stands. Are there students at times that I think maybe could be sneaky? Are there times that, yeah, I'm sure that.
No, I'm not talking about
happens.
now, today, because I think hat on, hat off, right? That's
Gotcha.
yes or no. I'm talking about face visible to school staff. So does that mean it's gotta be above the eyebrows? Does that mean it's gotta be, like, it's a little bit vague, and I'm a little concerned about enforceability and equality of enforceability, the way it's written.
Okay. I can see what you mean in regards to that becoming another debatable, concern. And how does that hat or hood, and if I say I can't recognize you as a dean or a staff member, I think there does have to be some sort of authority of that person to be able to say, I can't recognize you. So it either needs to come back or, so I do think that could be the next step.
Just to answer Mrs. Stiff's question, it would have to include do-rags and bonnets, or else I don't know how we would equitably enforce it. And so my answer would be the same as last year. I don't know how, if you allowed a hat, but you didn't allow a do-rag, I think that could potentially lead to accusations of inequity and cultural bias. So that's how I would answer that.
What percentage are we talking about that we're dealing with, that this has to come to the board?
So the hard part in regards to like pulling discipline data, so many times we're teaching to this, until it becomes, we have had students that we've had to address, and if they're escalating quickly, then it becomes a disrespect type of behavior. Other times, many times, counselors, deans, teachers, administrators are sitting down with the student, figuring out the root cause. And then at that point, we're not giving consequences for it. We're teaching to it. We're getting the hat off. If it's becoming a repeated issue, there's times we're bringing a parent in. We're having more deeper conversations. So I don't have discipline data for you. It's an exhausting amount of time that all staff are putting into it. And because we're not looking at just consequencing to the behavior. So I don't have that data necessarily for you. I can tell you it's happening on a daily, like I said, hourly basis of giving warnings and teaching to the expectation.
Do you think that the percentage have went down since this been implemented, considering last year?
Julie wasn't here.
I wasn't here last year, so I don't want to be able to.
That's a good question that I don't specifically know the answer to. I don't have that information.
So is it more students wearing,
there's
No,
less
because
students
there's
wearing
always,
hats.
There's less
Listen,
students this year.
Yeah, there's
Would we all
because
agree?
we know when you give them an inch, they're gonna take them out. And we know that now they're wearing the ninja hoodies, right, where their face is covered. So that's gonna be another battle. I just think there's always going to be something, right?
And I don't disagree with you, and that, that was a part of the committee discussion, and it was being brought because we do want to be able to work with staff to prioritize what those things are. When we're talking about hoods being off and IDs on, if I have a quick second as a kid is walking by me, I would rather make sure that that ID is on and that safety is a concern than hood off, hood off. The hood is definitely going to grab your attention because we have a mob of kids walking through and we're addressing the hood. Being able to have the opportunity to be able to prioritize IDs, other safety concerns, as well as other expected behavior is why it's being brought again today. Other questions?
We made a pretty big change to the clothing last year. How has that worked out?
I will say, it's very rare that we are needing to have extensive conversations. I think mostly with young ladies, where it's gotten to the point where we would have to address that. That is not happening on a regular basis. At West, I'm probably seeing the same thing.
All right, thanks, Julie. So now I'm just going to bring home, the last topic is the student handbook adjustments. So if you take a look at it on the screen here, really there's just some small revisions to what we already have as the student handbook. So we added language, the proposal is to add language about My School Bucks. So the committee felt it was important to actually list the steps for parents and students to actually set up their account. So that's an addition there. We added language about the mental and behavioral health days. So students are allowed those special absences. That was not in our planner, so now we have it in our planner under special absences. Updated the bus procedures, IDs, and activity stickers for passes. So I believe the wording now is students may be asked to present an ID. We're proposing that they are going to be required to have their ID. The committee did some work and they found out that more issues are happening after school with the activity buses. And so some students are hanging around and getting that ride home. And we want to just ensure, the committee felt it was important to ensure that those that are getting a ride home on the activity bus are involved in an activity, involved in a club, or receiving some tutoring or some help from a teacher or other staff. So that was the proposal there.
Can I stop you?
Sure.
Who would be monitoring that?
So it would be the bus drivers. So one of the things we did identify is that there's some inconsistencies with bus drivers and across campuses. So, for example, Central has, for the most part, when a new sport starts, they'll give a sticker or some kind of pass that goes on the back of their ID, so that signifies that they could ride the bus home. And so the other campus, the representatives from the other campus like that. So that's an example. Now, again, we're looking at the proposals for what goes into the handbook. We'll kind of iron out the procedural stuff later, but that's one thing we've done for the activity buses.
Okay, so that's how it'd be monitored. Okay. I just wanted to know how would you be able to identify, so you really just answered my question.
I think the other issue with the activity buses is that, with the regular day buses, most of our bus drivers have pretty good attendance, so they get to know their students.
Okay.
It's different with the activity runs. Sometimes there are different bus drivers that are running them, and so they don't get to know the students as well as their regular bus route. So this would just enhance or ensure that they were involved in something after school.
Okay.
The middle one on the bottom there is, currently it says that if there's any cheating or plagiarism issues, it'll go to the dean or the counselor. The committee felt that a first good step would be to go to the counselor first, to just identify the route there and see if there would be a need to get the dean involved. So again, the committee felt that was a good first step. And then the last one is, what we found is when we were really going through the planner, I think this is a result of reviewing it every year. I know I've probably done it about 20 times in my career as part of the committee. And so things are added and deleted and then added back in. And so we were looking at it and there were some sections that didn't really flow real well. And so we just looked at it, we moved some items around. I know you had that copy earlier, but we just made some adjustments to the language and for better understanding the location of that. And then the last thing I'd like to make note of is we have a practice that when we're involving law enforcement and students' names are in a police report, we have a practice that we contact parents when we know of that information, but the committee felt it was important to put that in as more of a procedural, kind of a policy thing. So taking it from practice to policy. But again, our practice is that we notify parents when we know of that. Okay? I think all of your questions were for Julie.
I was
Thanks,
just gonna
Julie.
say, welcome, Julie.
But our last slide is questions. Any questions about any of the work we did with the committee?
I just want to say thank you for your work on this committee. Thank you for thinking about the resources available to our students, all of them across the board. Extremely important. We have many students that are under-resourced. I wish there was more than one teacher on that, but I'm sure you had a lot of input from them anyway. So thank you for that work.
So just to remind the board of the process too, the policies and exhibit are in, like I said, for first read under new business business, the recommendation for the dress code will just come in the form of a memo. And then everything that was regarding to the handbook, that will be given to Mrs. McDonald as that work is done through her office to make the changes just to the handbook. So, and then any policy changes would also go into the handbook.
Oh, I do have one more question. Would that take effect immediately, or is this for next year?
Next year.
Okay.
Next year, so then we're trying to make sure we bring this to conclusion in March so that we can get the handbook solidified, because as we're doing our new registration process, then we can do the sign-offs for all of our students through our student management system.
Let's see if we can think of some more things for the men. No. No, I don't have anything.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, and our last presentation this evening is accelerated placement, class of 2027. And we have Mr. Hackney as well as Mr. Oswald talking about this. And I'm sure Mrs. McDonald probably will chime in from time to time. So thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
For the last presentation, we're very excited about this, but I promise we'll be concise. So accelerated placement for the class of 2027, so next year's current eighth graders, but incoming freshmen for next year. Just as a reminder, accelerated placement is from Public Act 105, and we also have JTHS policy 6135 that was adopted in February of 2022. Basically, what this allows for is to make sure that using an objective state exam or a local exam that's also an objective exam, we can make a decision to look at incoming students for next year who basically are on track for college and career readiness. And so based off those scores, if they're on track for college and career readiness, the idea is to accelerate them into like an honors class or an AP class, so the next most rigorous course that students could take, again, if they're on track for college and career. A few of the details that make it a little interesting in terms of the class of 2027 is that ISB decided to actually put off enacting this act until the 24-25 school year. And so at JT, what we did not want to have happen was the freshman class show up next year and then all of a sudden be accelerated as sophomores when we could make that decision to do that for them when they show up as freshmen. And so what we want to make sure we're doing then, of course, is providing them with the supports that they need to be successful. And then we'll also be monitoring their progress throughout being accelerated. Obviously, so that when we go into the 24-25 school year, and this becomes something that is no longer opt-in for families and for students, but is something that is going to be opt-out, again, in that 24-25 school year, we have a good system in place of how to begin to support students so that, again, once it's an opt-out instead of an opt-in, we can make sure that we're giving those supports so that all students can be successful. I just want to add, too, historically at JT, whenever we've opened up access for students, they've met the bar. So that's also something we're excited about, and why we're beginning next year with this group of incoming freshmen is really to make sure, again, that they have the access to this coursework, because, again, historically, we know that they'll meet the challenge. So tonight, I'm going to just briefly show how we're doing that in terms of access. And then Mr. Oswald is going to jump in and talk about support and monitoring. And then Diane, of course, Ms. McDonald will jump in as well as needed. So our current placement, which is what we began looking at the class of 2027 with, we use the PSAT 8-9, and our current placement for AP Human Geography, for Honors English, and for Honors Biology is a 720 to 440 as a placement cutoff. You'll notice, though, that the College Board actually describes the benchmark for college and career readiness for, again, incoming ninth graders at a 390. And so our honors criteria is currently at that 440, but the College Board's saying, hey, for accelerated placement, you just need to be on level, right? You need to show that you're college and career ready. And so, or on track for college and career readiness, excuse me. And so that's actually a 390. And so because of that, we want to make sure that we're in line with that. And so again, for next year, that incoming class for 2027, we've identified that group of students who are the 390 to 430 as a score. It didn't quite make the 440 for automatic honors placement, but that we definitely want to have a conversation with those families and with those students to consider for next year. For math, same kind of thing. We have a 720 to 460 honors current criteria, but the College Board does define college and career readiness, being on track for college and career readiness, at a 430. So again, we want to make sure we're adjusting for the class of 2027, those incoming students for next year, to make sure that, again, we're identifying students who are on track for college and career readiness and make sure that they have that option for honors algebra as well. I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Oswald here.
All right, thank you, Sean. Good evening. All right, so what we did, starting in about December, we started to have some conversations about what this is going to look like and how we're going to have our students opt into these courses, these accelerated courses. So when we're looking at pulling the data for the ERW scores and the math scores from the class of 2027, we're looking at our numbers on the right-hand side there. If we're looking at Central Campus, we clumped the English, science, social science, and then there were some students who fit all 4 criteria. There weren't as many of those because we really separated those out with the Central Campus math only. But those, when we say like the humanities and science, we had about 128 kids total for that, and then 52 just for math only. Compared to West, we had 136, so pretty similar. And then 41 just for the West Campus math only. So out of that, what we did is we sent an initial letter home, basically a snail mail, which occurred end of December after the holiday, right in the early part of January, which outlined what accelerated placement was, the different options for students based on their ERW scores. So that went out in both English and in Spanish. And then following that up, Sean and I split up the English, science, social science, and math phone calls, and then Nicole did the math phone calls. So we called upwards of, well, over 300 parents at that time. So it was a lot, but it was a really good experience because we got to talk to parents who were very excited to learn that, oh yes, my son or daughter could in fact take honors or accelerated courses, which was awesome. So that was great. And then if we didn't have a chance to talk directly to the parent, or the parent said, I'll talk to Johnny when he or she gets home, all that, we then followed that up with a Google form that went out to families, same information, but then they were able to basically choose whichever one met their criteria. So if they wanted just math, and that was the other thing too, when we were looking at this, parents and students didn't have to pick all of them. It was kind of an a la carte as opposed to like a dinner option, which was good because we want kids to be able to basically pick something that they're interested in. And if they're good in math and science, like, yeah, definitely take those. And then it might be another year before they take maybe honors English or an AP social science course. All right, so that's how we identified. Just real quick too, out of that number, we have about 60 plus students that are taking at least one honors or AP course for each campus. So out of those numbers, we have about 60 per. So 120 total and change. So it's really good. And we're not seeing out of those numbers, it's not like all 4 again. It's a lot of mixing and matching. The support that we're offering then is for those students, those 120 across the district. We're looking at our advisories next year where the students would be enrolled in a support advisory, which would then be using elements of what is called the AVID program. And so the staff members who would be part of that advisory would be trained in AVID strategies. These are a lot of skill-based strategies to help students that, you know, they're getting into these courses for the very first time. They might need some additional supports, and that's where AVID comes in. We do want to bring in some peer mentors of students who have been in these courses, especially students who might have struggled, but they've persevered, and they're showing that they can, in fact, do it. We want to see kids basically from all areas, too. So that's going to be really good for us to do. Avid strategies are really involved with what is called the acronym Y-Core, and that is something that we'll be trained in and how we're utilizing that in our advisory programs. We're looking at freshman year next year, and then when we look at the students then for grade 10, 11, and 12 moving forward, we would also have advisories built in for those students. So we would support the students currently in, and then additional students who are going to be in the accelerated placement program. So on the right-hand side, those people who are providing the support, there will be district leads involved there. A lot of the curriculum directors in the core areas will be our district leads, as well as Ms. McDonald will be part of that as well. The campus teams then will include building leadership, counselors, teachers, and then basically they would become like your Avid advisory teachers. So we're looking at around total about 16 people that fill a lot of those demographics. And that would be at both campuses. And then the Avid advisory teachers will be going through professional development. So we're not just saying tutor these students, support them. It's going to be focused training for those students, or for those teachers rather. Ongoing support then will occur, we'll start summer of 2023, and then we'll be able to use the Institute and School Improvement Time to have those teachers work through the Avid system, and then to basically co-plan together as well. And then the 9th grade honors teachers, we're starting with some AP Human Geography teachers, but also that will be expanded into other areas. So it's not just Human Geo, but we feel like that's the largest transition going from 8th grade into 9th grade for AP is probably a bigger gap because of the expectations with the College Board, but we're not going to just limit it to Human Geography teachers. In order to monitor the effectiveness of this, we'll be looking at the classroom teachers who are working directly with students. There's going to be a lot of data that comes out of this, both qualitative and quantitative data. When we're looking at our panorama dashboards, we'll be able to focus in on the students who are going to be part of these advisories. Where did they start? Where are they in the middle? Where are they at the end? To see if what we're doing is moving the needle and we're supporting our students in that area. And then because of our group dynamic, there will be a counselor at each building to help monitor those students to see what other supports that they need, and then we can work with those students directly. And the last part, Ms. McDonald will help explain the money side.
So when we talk about the counselor, with the board approved the college and career specialist, correct? That ties directly into this, because what they recommend. So this public act is wonderful, but within the public act, it doesn't say how to support students. So let's accelerate them, but we had the question, okay, we're gonna accelerate our students, but how do we support them? So that's where we, as, you know, how, and just to give kudos, how innovative our team is. Just leveraging successes that other schools have had with Avid and utilizing that curriculum and the expertise of our teachers knowing our kids. We feel like this is the best setup going into next school year. We know we always want to monitor student success. So Panorama will allow us to set up a group, and we can tag each student that is in this accelerated, so we can keep an eye on them, not only through their classroom teacher and counselor, but also through our data dashboard. So what we're requesting is approval from the board. 4 components is that we would purchase curriculum from Avid. It's a one-time purchase cost, about $19,000 that would come out of one of our grants. The Avid professional development for this summer is $24,000, which would be grant funded. That would take the 16 team members to training with Avid. The professional development would be ongoing, because then we would have another group the following school year, but this cost is just for the summer. And then also the addition of the Avid advisory teachers. So that's within the board packet as an action item with a job description and a stipend. So our Avid advisory teacher would be assigned, scheduled with our group of accelerated students, and work with them on a daily basis, leveraging the Avid curriculum.
So the Avid Lab advisory teacher wouldn't be a new FTE, it would be a stipend to an existing
Correct.
staff member.
Correct.
We reviewed the job descriptions and the stipend with the union, and they're in support. And it would be volunteer. It's not a forced position.
People would apply.
They would apply.
Any questions for myself, Mr. Hackett, or Mr. Oswald?
I just wanted to say, everyone at my work, the attorneys were all talking about their phone calls and the discussions. They didn't like the à la carte part. They wanted their students just to think that they had to do all of it. But they appreciated it and thought there was a consensus that they really enjoyed the discussions.
I think that was the best part.
Do I want to do it all the time? Probably. I mean, it took a lot of time, but it was great having those conversations. It really was.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And so that concludes our presentations, but the last report is our 10-day count, which obviously is something that the board looks at each semester. So it's the 10-day count for second semester, and the data shows that there has been a net loss of 114 students district-wide as compared to this time last year. And we'd be happy to answer any questions, but this is a semester report that comes to the board at the beginning of each semester. Any questions? All right, then that concludes our superintendent reports.
I have a lot of questions, but I'm gonna reserve them. Let's go to our action items. Action item A, Abbott Lab Advisory Teacher Job Description Recommendation. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero?
B, Learning Lab Support Teacher's Job Description Recommendation. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Questions?
I just want to point out, this was from January's board meeting in regards to our learning labs. So this is similar to the Avid Lab Advisory Teacher. So it is not an additional FTE. It is a stipend for their advisory time.
Roll call, please. Thank you.
Mrs. Guerrero-Namir?
Yes.
Mr. Bean? Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes. Let's go to C, deaf and deaf and hard of hearing. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved, and that social worker.
Oh, social worker, sorry. Which one? What did I skip? Oh, social worker and social worker, sorry.
I was just excited to say something.
Second.
Questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Adding a social worker, do we have one there now?
No, it's shared responsibility with the social workers at Central and Pathways. And because of the need that we talked about this year and growing need, that we feel that we need that additional position. And it would be paid out of IDEA. And the reason that we are coming a month earlier than staffing is just because we know we're vying for social workers in a time where so are other districts. And so we'd like, since we know it's a need for next year, it is counted as one of the 8 positions that Dr. Hampton shared with his assumption, but it would be dedicated to that program.
Okay. And we've got it here as 23, 24. What if by the grace of God, we find them like in 2 weeks? Would we start them early?
No, that wasn't the plan. That was not the plan. And again, this would be, that potentially could be limiting, because if somebody's under contract right now, we couldn't have them break a contract. So certified positions, the cleanest way to do that, unless they were a mid-semester grad, it would be a summer start.
Got it. Yeah, no, I support it. I think we need it, and I'm happy to get it.
And then the same for the additional position, that is a need. It's a growing need in the district. It's also a hard position to fill. And so that's another reason why we're coming to you a month before staffing, because we know that it is a need.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Guerrero Namir?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes. Request for disposal of D.
So moved.
Questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero Namir?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
E, donation of Joliet West cafeteria tables to Joliet Public Schools, District 86.
So moved.
Second?
Any requests to keep,
The new furniture will be installed during spring break.
all right, great job. No questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero Namir?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
F, donations.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Questions?
I just want to, there's a lot of donations that occurred, and we're just very fortunate to have such wonderful community partners, and when we have events, having them show their support.
I second that, and I look at this list and go to these places. They helped us. They're great places, and I hope people will frequent these businesses.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero Namir?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
G, second reading, one. Then you got, 1 through 4, yes, 1 through 4.
So moved.
Second?
Questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero Namir?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
H, personal reports. 1 through 12. Jemison? Roll call. Can I get a motion approved?
So moved. Second?
Roll call, please.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero Namir?
Yes.
Student discipline recommendation.
After receiving, deliberating the information contained in the hearing officer's report, the Board of Education is charged with deciding whether removing the child from his or her learning environment is in the best interest of the school, what the rationale is for the specific duration of the recommended expulsion, whether all appropriate and available behavioral and disciplinary interventions were exhausted, and whether the continued presence in school would either pose a threat to the safety of other students, staff, or members of the school community, or substantially disrupt, impede, or interfere with the operation of the school. The Board of Education must then convene into public session to formally vote on the motion to expel if the expulsion is the consensus arrived at during executive session. I propose a motion under case number W 222318, recommending expulsion until January of 2024 and placement at Lincoln School.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Guerrero Namir?
Abstain?
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
I propose a motion under case number C 222320, recommend expulsion until January of 2024 and placement pending diagnostic evaluation and placement determined by the IEP team.
Motion.
So moved.
Second. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Guerrero Namir?
Abstain?
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes. Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
I propose a motion under case number W222322S, recommending expulsion until June of 2023 and placement determined by the IEP team.
So moved.
Second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
No.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
No.
I propose a motion under case number W222323, recommend expulsion until January of 2024, placement at Lincoln School.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Unfinished business? No. The new business?
Those are already the policies that I referred to earlier.
Okay. Board reports? No. Moving right along here. There's no announcements or public comments? No? So, I make a motion that we,
Can I just say one thing, though? I would like to congratulate our Joliet West Girls Bowling team
oh, yeah.
on their second in state. So I know we're going to have a celebration on Friday, and then obviously we have both of our boys basketball teams playing each other tomorrow for regional.
Yeah.
And then we also have our African-American read-in tomorrow night. So it is a very busy week, and I just want to thank all of our staff for the outstanding work they do. But girls bowling was really intense, and I was